I was going to go back to college. I had finished my undergraduate work and had a conversation with my father about going back to school. And he said, if you want to go back to school, I'll see if I can help you out a bit with funds for school. So I called him and gave him the good news that I had been accepted and was going back to school. And he said, that's great. I spent the money on your brother. He needed it for school. So yeah, I had already made a commitment. I was moving home to the university I was going to was close to where my folks lived in the Chicago suburbs. And I opened up the paper and there was an ad at Hyatt. So I went, and it was kind of interesting. I went and I applied for this job as a kind of a front desk night audit person. And I interviewed this guy who's a close friend of mine today. And he says, look, I can't hire you. You're overqualified and you're going to quit on me in 2 weeks. And I said, look, Carlos, I guarantee I'm not going to quit. I have to have this job because I'm already committed and I'm going to school. So he reminds me of that every now and then because he's still with Hyatt also, and that was 30-some years ago. And he said, he says, you promised me you wouldn't quit, but I really didn't think you were going to stick around this long. As my background historically is not architecture, is not design, one thing that I think that I do well is I don't think I'm an architect nor a designer. So I don't try and say, oh, I know what this should be, what the millwork should be. I try to understand who the firm is. Hopefully we're working with we've selected well, or we help an owner select well, and then let them do what they do and do it really well. I think we get caught up too often on things that the customer doesn't care about. You know, you can sit there and you'll watch sometimes somebody talk for an hour over the color of the millwork and whether it should be a little bit more chocolate or it shouldn't be. Customer doesn't care about that. We care about it, but the customer doesn't care about it. And so I try to work with them saying, let's think about the functional aspect of it, let's think about form, and let's make sure that it has to look great, but let's not worry about some of that other aspect of it and let you do what you do and do it well. And make sure that in the end, from a design perspective, I don't necessarily want everybody to walk in and look at it and say, this is X person's design. I'd like them to look at it and say, this is a great Hyatt brand, it represents it well. My daughter plays tennis now, and it's a pleasure to watch you know, someone play at that small age, you know, and you know, you talk about character builders. You know, it's the only sport that, as a child, you have no timeouts, you have no coaching while you're out there, and you're all by yourself. And as a parent, you're watching, and you know, when they're playing well, it's the greatest thing in the world. When they're not, it's really hard sometimes because you see how they're struggling, and it's just been amazing to watch her growth over the last few years. From, you know, sometimes you forget how young they are when they're playing and playing competitively, and so it's been great to watch her mature. And you know, if on a weekend that I have time and I can sit there and I could spend the entire day doing that in a way is a guilty pleasure. You know, it's really a tremendous amount of fun. The individuals that do things like daily, every single day, you know, you learn as a younger manager, you know, as you're moving and sometimes you're thinking, well, why aren't they doing this better or differently? And then you realize that that individual might be doing that exact same thing for the next 20 years. That's really hard. That's harder than what I've done. You kind of have this incredible respect for those individuals, those folks that work and make it happen on a daily basis, because they're not going through that change. So I guess I kind of look up to to that group of associates of ours and people that I've worked with over time that have done that and contributed so much. Piano, it's the only class I ever proficiency'd out of in college. So I finished that, and then trumpet was my instrument after that, yes. all 4 of my children have played the trumpet. And so I have played with them from time to time. My daughter now, who's the youngest at 11, is playing currently. One of the most terrifying days I ever had was probably about, I don't know, 10 years ago with, maybe 10 years ago with my son, who was taking piano lessons as well at the time. And he asked me to play a duet with him at a recital. And I can get in front of 500 people and speak, and I won't have a nervous bone in my body. But in front of 20 8-year-olds and their mothers and fathers, I was scared to death because I thought I was really this was gonna be a disaster. And I practiced and practiced and practiced, and we got it right. We hit it together at the end note, and I said, I'm never playing the piano again. That was the end of it right then and there.